All right, everybody, great to see you here. Thanks for joining us today. I am very, very happy and proud to have Dr. Robert Melillo here with me on this call. Um, I will just give a few words of introduction on this great man who is a mentor for me and a friend for many years now. He's a chiropractor for, I think, almost 40 years now, 35. He's been specializing in functional neurology for about 30 some years. He's developed the developmental functional neurology specialty that I am proud to be a fellow of. He's written 7 books by now.
8.
7 books? 8? I'm sorry, including a textbook, right? One of them I had the pleasure of translating to Hebrew, and he's written many chapters in books and written papers, and he's a very prolific man, and he's a family man as well. So I'm very proud to have him here with us to talk about basically his course that we'll be teaching here in Israel starting February 20th. So Dr. Robert Melillo, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Obviously, I appreciate the introduction, but it's an honor for me to be here, and I'm so excited that you're going to be bringing my work hands-on to other people. So yeah, I'm really grateful for you. So thank you.
Well, thank you, of course. And I'm very proud and humbled to be able to do that. I've been wanting to do it for better part of 6 years, I think. So I'm very happy that it's happening, and we partially have Corona to thank for that, because I doubt that without it, I would have had the audacity to just come up to you about, what was it, like 9-10 months ago and say, hey, Rob, I want to teach this course. And I was very surprised and not surprised by your answer that was, sure, let's do it. So, Rob, why do you think this system that you've developed is so much different than anything else out there?
It's there's a number of different reasons, obviously, but I think that it's a combination of perspectives that I've had and how we've put it together. I think it all starts with the primary question, which is what is actually happening in the brain in someone with a developmental issue such as ADHD or autism or dyslexia, whether they're a child, adolescent, or adult. What is actually happening in the brain? What starts it? And how does it relate to all of the symptoms and issues that they have? Because they don't just have learning problem or an attention problem. They have digestive issues. They have immune dysregulation. They have other types of, vitamin and mineral deficiencies, and they have gut problems and they have all these things. So it really comes down to understanding, what is the primary problem? And that, for me, was the first question that I asked when my son was labeled with an issue. I felt like I couldn't really move forward without knowing that. I couldn't move forward with, can I help him? How can I help him? What is the cause of this? Can I really go back and look at, is there anything in the environment impacting this that I can change? The realities about, what I could expect, none of that really could I answer if I didn't know what the primary problem was. And when I went out initially asking other doctors and therapists that I hoped would know, they had no clue. And I realized that most of the people out there working with these issues have no idea what's actually happening in the brain. No clue whatsoever. And so they're out there doing their best. And I don't mean that to disparage people. They're doing their best, and they're trying, and they each have their clinical piece that they've been taught, and they approach it, and they're usually looking at one piece of the bigger puzzle, like an OT doing physical activities, or a nutritionist doing the nutrition, or an academic, trying to do academic type of education or education therapy, or psychotherapist trying to do psychotherapy. And they're looking at it from their own perspective, an optometrist doing eye exercises, a chiropractor doing adjustments, and they're not realizing, that you need to look at the whole brain, what the issue is, right? And that it all starts with understanding, what is actually happening in the brain. And I think that perspective from the beginning is what, makes unique, because I've spent, my whole career really trying to understand and answer that question, not just from the question of what is it for knowing, but then what can we actually do about it? And then, using all the different tools together. So I think that's one of the things that makes this unique is that we're really looking at addressing the core issue in each individual person.
That's I completely agree. I think that's what I have been seeing is I see all these different professionals who are very good at what they do, but like you said, they look at things from a very I don't want to say narrow, but a very specific point of view, and it's hard for them to kind of go around and change the perspective and use different tools. And what I like a lot about what we have been learning from you and what's been developing over the last few years is really how we can use endless tools in very, very different ways to achieve what we want to achieve. And one of the questions I have been asked by one of the people who wanted to take the course and is thinking about it is, do they need to buy different equipment? And what is that? And I know that not a lot, but we do spend some time demonstrating and showing different tools that we've been using, like the interactive metronome and the Resimax and the iLights and lasers and different tools. And so I just wanted you to maybe give your opinion as to the different tech solutions, and do we need them? What's their importance?
Yeah, there's different levels and different options. I think that's the beauty, because it's really the operating system, right? The operating system, the Melillo method, or, the idea of what are we trying to do? And you can do that with no equipment and change it and make a huge difference, or you can have the most sophisticated equipment in the world. I tell people when they come to my center and they're in my office, I tell them this is, when you talk about brain rehab, this is the most sophisticated center in the world right now, right? There is nothing more sophisticated than what we're doing at the upper level when you're using all of these tools. But again, it's just a faster, quicker, more direct way of changing the brain in the way that we know that we need to change it, right? So, but there are different ways to do that. And so, as you know, my book, Disconnected Kids, which you translated and which has been translated into 15 languages and is one of the best-selling books in this genre in all time. In that book, we use virtually no equipment, right? I mean, there really is no expense and there's no sophisticated equipment really that we talk about, other than using like a flashlight and a tennis ball and I get literally emails or Facebook posts or Instagram posts from people around the world every day that are just using that book and are getting miraculous changes in their kids. And then we also know that Harvard did that study on my work, and they used almost identical to what was in Disconnected Kids. We had a little bit more equipment, like I think they used the iLights maybe, but for the most part, again, they used almost nothing other than also the interactive metronome. And in 15 weeks, they saw physical and functional changes in the brain that they had never seen before. And this was documented by looking at brain imaging, as well as changes in neuropsychological and academic testing that was as good or better than any medication that they'd ever studied for kids with ADHD. So, you can go as sophisticated as you want. And the more difficult, the more challenging the case, I think the more tools you want to bring to bear, right? So what I've been focusing, as you know, on the last 5 years or so is really working with the most difficult cases that I can get my hands on in the world. And that's really what I've been focused on. And, things like nonverbal autism, which can be very, very challenging. I don't know if there's a more challenging condition, but even in adults, things like bipolar or, dyslexia or schizophrenia and, all those different types of things, brain injury, genetic disorders, really, really super difficult things that was really beyond what we were looking to do with Disconnected Kids. And with that, having the tools, really makes a difference.
Okay. That's a fair answer, as they say. So yeah, the more complicated you want to go, the more tools you probably want to use. But like you said, for most kids, I'd say 70 to 80% of kids, you can probably do it with what you have in your kitchen and your smartphone. Yeah.
Exactly. And like I said, it really comes to, this is the importance of the course that you're teaching. It really comes down to understanding what are you trying to do. And then the tools just become ancillary, right? It means that,
Right.
I want to take this visual pathway and do something with it on one side of the brain. How do I do that? There's many different ways to do it, but you have to know that you want to do that and then do it in combination with other things at the same time. So it really comes down to understanding the operating system. And then the tools, you can, all the time I get students that really make up tools and they're great ideas and they'll say, hey, I use this way. And I'm like, wow, that's great. I never thought about it, So, and that's what I'm excited about, you teaching this to other people, because, I always develop this as, this is the basic core ideas and concepts. But I want, we need this to get out there because the world is desperate for it. And, there is nothing that gets results like what we do. There is nothing. I mean, as you know, speak to people and, see patients from all over and that have tried everything. And they're just not getting anywhere near the results that we're getting. It's really quite remarkable.
Every time I read, a success story from, one of our colleagues and friends, I'm, oh my God, that is so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I get, in Israel, we have a lot of people who are trained in different disciplines, I'll call it, or different methods, better than disciplines, different methods of approaching developmental delays and mostly academic stuff, academic difficulties like ADHD or dyslexia or sensory processing. And I sometimes find that we go into a conversation and it feels like we're having a similar conversation, like we're talking the same language, but then at some point I realize that I'm talking about something completely different than what they're talking about.
Right.
And at that point, it's a lot of times it's hard for me to maybe explain what my perspective of the developmental disorder is. So could you give a short basic explanation as to what we're looking at when we see a child with a developmental disorder? Why is it such a unique perspective? What are we looking at the brain? What are we looking to see in the brain?
Right. Well, that's the thing. I think that, you take an academic and they look at this as an academic problem. You have a psychologist, they look at it as a psychological problem. And I'm trained in all of those different disciplines, so I understand their perspective. But again, most of those people cannot answer what is the primary problem. So when I'm conversing with somebody to try to get us on the same page, I usually start with, well, what is this learning disability? What is actually the root cause of it? And again, they don't know that, right? They know their clinical perspective. And so without understanding that these are neurological issues, even something like dyslexia, that's the definition. It's a neurological developmental issue. And so that's the idea. So the understanding is that these are neurological issues that are developmental, meaning they happen during development, and there are these imbalances, if you will, that occur within the nervous system during development, and much of that goes back to movement and motor progression and other environmental factors that impact the expression and development of the brain, even back to the womb, right? But in most cases, these are not genetic disorders, which is what most people are taught, and they're not genetic mutations. And most people start off with that. Well, it's a genetic disorder. There's nothing I can do about it. That's wrong, right? So these are epigenetic, which means that there's no damage or injury to a gene. The genes are there. They're just not being turned on appropriately at the right time. And timing of development is everything, right? Because the brain needs to go through stages of development. And those stages are there for a reason. They go back to evolution, and they go back to the way the brain has evolved over time. And we need to go through those steps. And if we don't go through those steps, then it affects the ultimate development of the brain. So, one of my favorite quotes is from Ankin Gherkin, who wrote a book called The Ontogenesis of Lateralization of the Brain, meaning how does the brain become lateralized? And he wrote that, it's important to look at the developing brain because ultimately the child's brain, and looking at how that proceeds gives you a window into the adult brain, right? That's the ultimate. So when you look at, 20% of children have some sort of diagnosable disorder, whether it's education, mental health, and 20% of adults. So is that a coincidence, or is it the same population that just was never dealt with appropriately? So understanding that, what's happening is genes have to be expressed. The right brain develops first in the womb and for the first 3 years. And there's many different things. We're writing a paper right now for a journal called Symmetry on really the details of brain asymmetry and going back that, brains have been asymmetric since the beginning of a brain. 500 million years ago, we have evidence in trilobites that there was asymmetry, right? And so looking at that and looking at animals and looking at comparative anatomy and going through the asymmetry of the brain and how it may get that way, we know that the right brain develops first. And there's genetic reasons for that, but there's also mostly environmental factors. And then at 3 years, the left brain kicks in and that develops for 3 years. And the combination of environmental stimulus, genes that are being expressed at different times, receptors that are active at different times will shape the right brain and the left brain and how it reacts to those environmental stimulus and how it perceives them. And if anything alters that, if anything, if the left brain develops first, or if the right brain doesn't develop long enough and the left brain kicks in too soon, or the right brain develops than it should or longer than it should, or if there isn't this asymmetry of development, it alters the way the brain is going to grow and develop and ultimately how it's going to create communication and connections within the brain. Because ultimately what makes the human brain unique is the way we communicate and the way we're able to have all of these different areas and basically have two different brains that do very complex things. And how we bring that all together and integrate it is critical. And that comes down to timing and coordination. And that first starts in the body. So that's why looking at child development, looking at those motor milestone developments is critical. When a child rolls over, when they crawl, how they crawl, when they get up and start cruising, when they walk, which then leads to when they talk and how they're going to learn. And all of those are very, very important. And there's a much more narrow window, I believe. And if they don't develop, if they miss them, if they skip them, it means that something is happening that's affecting their motor development, that's affecting their brain development. And if it impacts the foundation of the development of the brain, it's only going to get worse as time goes on. If we build a building on a faulty foundation, the higher we build that building, the more likely it is to crack or collapse, right? So that's the idea synopsis of what we're looking at.
I think that's about the same way I explain it, only better. Which is okay. You have a few more years of experience on me on that.
A little bit longer, right? Yes.
So when you teach the course, it's usually taught over weekends, right? And
Yes.
we're going to be teaching this course a little bit differently. We're going to do it a weekly course for about 6 hours every time. But the overall amount is about the same. It's about 150 to 180 hours or so. And I've been asked if I believe that's enough time to teach someone to be a neurological specialist in developmental disorder. And so I just thought, I was just wondering what you thought about that question. I'll give you my answer. I'll give you the answer that I gave, and then if you want to elaborate.
Go ahead.
So what I said was this course is designed for people who already have training as some sort of therapist, which means they already have a lot of hours behind them, but they don't have the specific training that we provide, a specific understanding of the nervous system like you described before. So yes, I believe it's enough time. Would I like it to be longer? Sure. Would I like to be able to do a 4-year course on this? Sure. But we also need people to go out and help the kids. So that was kind of my answer to that in a short version. So I was just wondering what you thought about that concept.
Yeah, well, it depends on what your definition of a neurological expert is, right? And are we trying to create people that are neurological experts, or are we trying to create people that can go out and help and make a difference in the world, right?
Exactly.
So even at the most basic level, if people understand and can, get people to do the activities and exercise and understand why work on a basic level, they're going to make a difference. They're going to help people. Like if it is a parent helping their own child. Like I said, I've designed this at the most basic level that someone could read my book, or that I could just give them basic instructions and they can follow it and they can do it on their child and they can make a difference. To the most sophisticated level, where I believe the people that come through my course and that are actually able to go through the course and sit and take the fellowship test know more than almost anybody in the world. I think they are the top functional neurological specialists in the world, because the course itself, as you know, is demanding. And we have a testing process that is also demanding, that if you don't pass the test, then you didn't learn the material at the level that we expect. And so I believe that, at any level, they're going to help people, which is really what we're looking to do. We're also raising awareness, again, of what the actual problem is. But to become truly great at anything, obviously takes experience, takes work, and takes, years of really working hard at something, the whole 10,000 hour rule, right? But whether you're doing something for 10,000 hours, how you're doing that, what are you learning, what are you doing, when you have this information, and then you compile, let's say 10,000 hours of work on that, you're going to make an impact more than almost anybody else can, because of what you're doing and how you know what you're doing. So I believe that it's a challenging course, even though we teach it in an understandable way. I've had parents that have gone through my course with no health background, and yet, I've gone through it. But the more background, the better. That's why I just created this new neuroanatomy course, right? Because I think that the real challenge, because again, when you're trying to understand what's actually happening in the brain, I think having a sophisticated understanding of really the functional neuroanatomy, I think that's the most challenging for people, right? Because when you're teaching a therapist procedures, or this is how you diagnose, or these are the tests, that's relatively easy. It's the concepts that underlie it, like understanding the brain and how it works. And, that is a little bit challenging. So there's always a way of improving your knowledge. And we try to continue to give more tools to be able to do that. And obviously we expect I give people a lot of papers to read, and I'm sure you're going to as well. So there's a lot of reading material, and you're going to learn stuff, and I'm still evolving. I'm still developing. I'm learning more every day. And that's partly why I still teach a lot, because, and I know you're going to learn as you teach this course. So, I think the greatest gift in life is to continue learning. So, you're never going to be at that pinnacle where you say, I don't need to learn anymore. But I think even at the most basic level, you're going to be able to create incredible value in this world. And obviously that creates value to the person doing it.
I can't even respond to that, because it just hits the nail on the head, as they say. All right, great. So let's summarize, or bring this into a conclusion. So what would you say to someone who's considering taking this course starting February 20th? If they're kind of still, should I do it? Is it worth the money? Is it worth the time? I don't know. I have other things to do.
Yeah, they have to look at, their reasons for why they want to do this, right? You may have people that have their own children, right? And that they want to help their own children. And so you look at that, and that is basically the purest motivation. And so anybody that really, looks at it from that perspective, I don't think they're going to say, well, I don't have enough time or money, or, I don't want to work that hard to help my child, right? Who would say that, right? I think most parents would say, I'll do whatever, right? And if this course is going to help me help my child at a level that is beyond what anybody else can do, then I'm in. I don't care what it costs or how much time or how much effort I have to put in, right? And I think that if you have that perspective as a parent, and then if you don't have a child, but you're a therapist working with other parents, you understand that, wow, that's what, how important this is. What really motivated me was the first time I got a child with autism to speak that would have probably never spoken. And, and at in the beginning, I didn't know if I actually did it, right? I mean, all I know is that I was working with this child for about 3 or 4 weeks. Before the parents came in to see me, the first day they came in to see me, the mom was crying because they had just come from a psychiatrist that told them to start looking for an institution for their child because that's where they would end up. And then, 4 weeks later, she's coming in crying, hugging me because her child spoke and she gave me credit. And I remember the whole family was around hugging me, right? Even the father was this big guy, like 6'5", and I remember thinking to myself, I don't know if I did this, if I had anything to do with this, but if I did, this is what I'll do for the rest of my life, because what is more important than this? And it wasn't just the changes that was going to happen in this child's life, which, by the way, that child now I know ended up going to college and, really having a pretty good life, right? I have another child like that who's actually going to start coming to work for me in my center. He's 22 and he's going to start to work with me. And he's a very highly functioning kid. I thought, what could be more important than that? And it not only impacted the child, but what it did to the parents, like the relief on their face, the gratitude for them. And they were the same age as me. Their kids were the same ages as mine. And I related to it because I thought, what if my child was nonverbal? And I had a child who had a diagnosis, so I understood what they felt, but not to the degree that they felt it. But, I thought, what could be more important in life than to be able to do that? What could be more valuable to be able to have the ability to do that, right? And for me, that was a priority. Now, I wanted to really make a big impact in the world, as do you. And I want to add as much value as I can in this life before I leave it. And I want to leave a trail so other people can follow, because I know what the impact this has and how important it is, and that nobody else is doing it at this level. And I know the need that's out there. I get letters from people all the way desperate, looking for, I live this country and this, and especially now with COVID, because they can't come to see me here. I want to get that out there. Now, if somebody's out there and they decide, listen, I want to make an impact in the world. If somebody's in healthcare, it's usually because they already have that within them. And then they have to decide, how good do you want to be? How great do you want to be? Do you want to be great at something? Do you want to make an incredible impact or value? And then when you look at that, to change, the level of impact that you can make, and it only is going to take a 150-hour course. It's 60 hours, 6 hours a week. And it's a nominal fee to do that. That commitment is going to guarantee you that you're going to add a tremendous value. And I guarantee you that money is going to come back to you 10 times over, that the time is going to come back to you 10 times over. But if you look at it and think, well, this is a lot of work and I don't know if it's work for money, then this probably isn't the course for you, because you're not committed to really making that much of an impact in the world. And that's okay if that's what you want. But, I mean, if you want to really make a difference at the highest level, I don't think there's a more important thing that you can do in the world than to help disabled children and their families, and not just teach them how to manage it, but to literally change it. And in most cases, eliminate it, completely eliminate the problem, moving forward. I mean, that's, I don't think there's a more important thing you can do. So when you look at it from that perspective, for me, this is the kind of course that if somebody had this course, I would have, gone
first one to sign up.
Exactly. I would have climbed the Himalayas. I would have spent $1 million to be able to get this information, right? But here it is, it's available. And so, you just have to look at it and say, how important is this to you? How important is making a difference in the world? And if it is, then I don't think there's anything more that you could do. And this course is, relatively reasonably short. It's not like, a 3-year course or a PhD, which I'm going through now at 60 years of age in Israel. So, I mean, there's, it's really, it's like when parents say to me, yeah, if parents are really that concerned about money and time, I don't know if I can drive 30 minutes 3 times a week or pay that amount of money. I usually say then this isn't for you, because you're not, to get the results, you need to be committed. And, and so therefore, if you want to do it, if this is important to you, then, those things aren't a question.
You touched on a point that I wasn't going to go into, but you did touch on it. And I have been asked, and people kind of, when I say things like, I can help your child, and he may not have symptoms when we're done. He may not have ADHD, or he may not have dyslexia, or he may even not have ASD. They kind of look at me funny. Mm-hmm. And some of them actually get angry with me. I remember I had this conversation with a mom, and I told her, hey, her son was Asperger's, was diagnosed with Asperger's. And I said, well, it's possible that we can, eliminate his symptoms. Yeah, for sure. And I remember her face kind of there was a screen that came down, and she could not hear me. And he was 10, I think, or 9, and he was diagnosed when he was 2. So, and I immediately saw how she had just spent 7 or 8 years accepting that her son is always going to be this way. And I just told her, no, he's not. And so her response was a flight response. Like, she is not going to talk to me anymore.
Right.
It took them about 2 years before they came into my office. And so how do you respond to that conversation? And not necessarily with this woman, or with anyone who kind of tells you, no, you can't really change those. You can't eliminate them. That just doesn't happen.
Back to the first thing we said. I asked them, well, what is autism? What is actually happening in the brain? You tell me. And they'll always turn around and go, well, I don't know. And then I say, then how can you say you can't change it? You're coming from a misconception. Is autism genetic? And they say yes. And I say, no, it's not. Is there a gene mutation? Is there damage to genes? And they think yes. Is there damage to the brain? They usually think yes. And both of those things are completely wrong. There is no damage or injury to the brain. The brain doesn't look that much different in an autistic brain. And we've done research and studies on this, so I know it. And it's, part of my PhD right now that I'm doing. And the other thing is that it's not a genetic mutation. There are, as you know, kids with syndromic genetic mutations that are also labeled with autism, but we're very careful to understand that. And we understand that we're not going to change a genetic mutation, even though we might be able to help its expression. But it comes back to, again, saying, what is the actual problem? It's a functional developmental issue. There are some limitations, obviously, in some kids. This is what I'm trying to really understand. Those kids, some of those kids that have the really nonverbal, completely nonverbal, and there are differences in those children. There are some children that they will start to speak at some point, and when they speak incredibly fluently, even though a little robotic, and their articulation is great. And there are other kids that just can't speak, and trying to understand why they can't. And even when you use a letter board with them, it's there. The language is there. They're maybe geniuses, but they can't speak. So part of what I'm looking at now is, how do we free that up? How do we change it? And I have been able to do that in some of those kids. But the problem is that, again, a lot of there's this big kind of thing right now where, everything is acceptance, right? A child is different, a child is disabled, and you must accept them. And I completely agree with that, right? A child should always be accepted for who they are. And some parents will say, people in my family are saying, just leave them alone. This is who they are. Why do you have to try to treat them, right? But the child can't speak, or the child is very anxious, or the child has no friends, or the child has terrible digestive issues and, eczema and other things going on that really hurt them and make them feel uncomfortable or in pain, right? So you're saying, okay, well, leave them alone and leave them in pain. Okay. And my attitude is, no, actually, you're not seeing the ultimate version of this child. This child is not who they were meant to be. There's another version of them that's really brilliant. Because I let people know that the kids that end up with these imbalances, the reason is because they're unusually gifted in certain areas on one side of the brain. And that is the fact, right? That you look at their family, you look at their parents, you look at the trait. The only genes that relate to this is it's a family trait. So Simon Baron-Cohen of Cambridge showed that in kids with Asperger's and autism, that their families, they have physics professors in their family and engineers, and the most common job of a father was an engineer, and mathematicians, and that anywhere where there are people that work in the IT industry, there's an explosion of Asperger's and high functioning autism. And why is that? Because there's an autism trait that's also known as an intellect trait that I refer to as a left brain dominant trait, right? And so their parents are brilliant, their siblings are brilliant, and they are the most brilliant, but because they have this area that's so strong, if something interferes with development on the other side, it's more pronounced, this imbalance is more severe. So there's this genius inside that's unlocked that can't get out. And we have the potential of unlocking it, or at least partially unlocking it, right? And you're reducing the symptoms and allowing this child. And one of the greatest statements that parents have said to me, and I've heard it thousands of times, is when they say to me, thank you. You gave me the child that we always knew was there, that for some reason couldn't get out. And you allowed that to happen. And that's what I believe. There's a different child in there. And so there's the question of, do we just accept this? If we can't change it at all, then yeah, accept it and make sure, and always accept differences in other people, no matter what. Nobody should be made to feel bad or anything like that. But there's a difference with accepting the child and accepting the disability and giving up, right? And quitting and saying, okay. And most parents are not going to do that. I mean, and so for me, people come to me from all over the world. And they come to me for help. I'm not going out seeking them, right? At this point in my career. So they come to me where they already are looking for a change. And they're looking, help my child, help me. And so I'm happy to do that. But, I have been attacked in the autism community sometimes because of saying things like, we can help, we can change, we might be able to prevent some of these, issues from occurring. And, people with right brain deficits or very left brain dominant, they tend to take things very literal, and they're also less self-aware. So many of the parents aren't aware of their own, quirks or issues, and they're not as aware in their child. And so they don't look at it as a problem per se, because again, many of these people or this child may have unusual gifts. And many of the parents are like, well, we don't want them to lose their gifts. And I understand that. And they don't. We've proven that. that they don't lose their genius. They just bring the other side up to match it, so they don't have the anxiety and the tics and the stims, and they can be more aware of people, and they can be more aware of their own body, and they can have better health and better digestion and a better immune system, and they can still be this genius but be happy and have social relationships and all of that. But people are brainwashed because they're told there's nothing you can do. Don't just accept it. There's nothing that can change. And when you're brainwashed to just accept it over time, and then you do, it's hard to break that. And that's why we need to change the narrative. And we need to change the narrative early on and actually make people realize what's possible. And again, it all starts with understanding what is actually happening in the brain, what is the problem. And then you can answer things like what is actually possible, what isn't possible, what could cause it, how do we change it, what can we actually expect? And that's why it all started with that. And that's really the foundation of your course, is that people are going to come out. And the one thing we can guarantee is that they are going to know more about what is happening in the brain in these disorders than just about anybody. And, from there, they can take it wherever they want.
That is the plan. All right. Well, Dr. Melillo, I think I've taken enough of your time for today. I really, really appreciate everything you had to say to all the people who are considering taking our course. And I'm sure it's going to be a huge, huge success here, because I think that people in Israel understand how many kids need help, and that many of them just aren't getting the help that they need, and they need something. They need this. So I'm hoping that what you had to tell them, and hearing you explain these things with your passion that is amazing after 30 some years of doing this, will help them understand that this is their opportunity to get this information, learn how to do this hands-on, not just get the course, but get the ropes.
Yeah, I think I just want to show you something here. So I think that in Israel, more than any other place, and part of the research why I'm doing my PhD there is because you're the leaders in research. And this is a very scientific based course. It's cutting edge science. And if anybody should get it, people in Israel should probably get that more than anybody else, because I think, they're open to, when you can prove it through research and through really understanding the science under it, I think professionals in Israel should be the leaders, I think, of everybody in the world. But I'm doing, as I said, a PhD looking at the relationship of primitive reflexes to autism and brain connectivity. And I'm working with a team of neurologists and other people from Israel and from other parts of the world, but Cuba, where we're collecting data. So the neurologists that were there, that I went down and trained them, when they started actually looking at primitive reflexes in all their patients, they were blown away. They could not believe it. And so they asked me, can we take your course? So they've taken my course online, right, which is essentially the same course you're going to be teaching, but you're teaching hands-on, which is really a better way to learn it, okay? And they sent me this image of them. This is them. And what it says is that this is them. It says, me and Marco at 5 a.m., we cannot stop watching your course. They were binge watching it, right? They're a married couple. They have 2 little children that were going to wake up soon. And they were like, our kids can make their own breakfast tomorrow, right?
That's awesome.
Watch my course, and they've watched it 3 times now. And at the end, they said, in each lecture, we realized more than how much we really needed this course. We don't learn this as neurologists, and this will change the world absolutely, right? And now they're starting to teach this to their neurology residents. And our goal is to make this the standard, that with MDs and with neurologists and pediatrics, that they know they don't just look at primitive reflexes just in the first year, that they look at it throughout the course of someone's life, right? And
Right.
so you can imagine the reaction like that of these. And so again, these people have gone through the course 3 times in a matter of a few months because they can't stop watching it. So that's the idea, when you're exposed to that type of information. And I think, people at the most sophisticated level, these are neurologists and researchers that are some of the best in the world as clinicians and researchers. And as soon as they saw this information, they immediately, jumped on it and wanted to take advantages. And they didn't say things like, how much does it cost and how long is it going to take? They were like, give it to me, right? And you're about to give people that opportunity. This is an unbelievable opportunity. And that's really the way they should look at it, that many doctors and therapists around the world would literally do anything. I mean, I've had people, as you know, travel from New Zealand and Australia and, on a monthly
Israel.
monthly basis to take my course for this time. And this is right there for people, it's convenient, it's local, it's hands-on. It's a great opportunity. So, and I think the people in Israel will appreciate it as much as anybody in the world. And for me, I just want this to spread everywhere. And anybody who does take this course, I can't wait for you to become certified, become part of the team. There's a need around the world. And I think that, it should start more than anywhere else in Israel and then grow from there because you're the leaders, I think, of cutting edge healthcare and science in the world.
That is the plan. Let's go do it. All right, Rob, thank you very much for being here and spreading some wisdom and enthusiasm and passion. And I thank you for everything you do. And we hope to actually get the chance to maybe have you teach a couple of hours when you're here for your project, for your PhD.
I'll be there. I have to be there anyway, but when I'm there, you won't be able to keep me away. I'm coming to that class one way or the other, whether you want me or not. I'm going to be there because I'm so excited about this. Again, I'm so grateful to you because this is a lot of work put on your part. You have family, you have children, you're sacrificing to do this, and you're giving people a tremendous opportunity. And so I'm so grateful to you and what you're doing. You've always been one of my best students I've ever had, and people should know how fortunate they are that they have you there as a teacher and as a doctor. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, Rob. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. And
Okay.
happy Hanukkah.
Bye, my friend.
Bye-bye. Thank you.